The foreman's laughter carried across the yard, clear as a bell. Silas Grant was in the barn when he heard it. Heard Jack Denton's voice rise above the others with that cruel edge that men get when they think they have an audience. She's too big for this ranch. Hell, she's too big for 2 ranches. Boss must be desperate if he hired her. More laughter. Silas set down the bridle he was holding and walked out into the sunlight. The men were standing by the bunkhouse, 5 of them, including Jack, and they all went quiet when they saw him coming. Silas looked at the woman standing by the wagon. Nora Blake just arrived, her face carefully blank. And then he looked at Jack Denton. "You are fired. Pack your things. I want you off my property before supper." Stories like this one remind you that character is what you do when you think no one important is watching. When you defend someone who cannot defend themselves. When you choose decency over convenience. If you want more stories that matter, subscribe so you never miss one. Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Because what happened after Silas Grant fired his foreman became the story that people in Copper Ridge, Wyoming told for the next 50 years about what it means to be a good man. Silas Grant had been running his ranch alone for 6 years when he hired Nora Blake. His wife had died of pneumonia in the winter of 1878. And after that, Silas threw himself into work. He built his herd from 40 head to 300. He bought the adjacent property when the owner died. He hired good men and paid them fair wages and ran the tightest operation in Copper Ridge. But he did not hire a housekeeper. Did not want a woman in the house where his wife had lived. Did not want someone else cooking in her kitchen or sleeping in her room or existing in spaces that still smelled like her perfume if you breathed deep enough. By 1884, the house was falling apart. The men complained about the food. Silas cooked when he remembered, which was not often. And when he did cook, it was barely edible. The floors were filthy. The windows were so dirty you could barely see through them. The whole place felt abandoned, even though Silas lived there. His foreman, Jack Denton, finally said something. "Boss, you need a housekeeper. This place is a disgrace. The men are talking. Let them talk. They are talking about leaving. Good men. They say they can get better food and cleaner bunks at the Morrison Ranch for the same wages." That got Silas's attention. He could not afford to lose good men. "Fine. Find a housekeeper." "What kind?" "I do not care. Someone who can cook and clean and stay out of my way." Jack put an advertisement in the newspaper in town. 3 women responded. Jack picked Nora Blake because she was the cheapest and said she could start immediately. Silas did not ask any questions, did not even meet her before she arrived. Just told Jack to handle it and went back to work. Nora Blake arrived on a Tuesday in May with everything she owned in one trunk and a carpet bag. She was a big woman, not just tall but broad, with wide shoulders and strong arms and a body that looked like it had been built for hard labor. She was 32 years old with dark hair starting to gray at the temples and a face that was plain and serious. She stood in the yard looking at the ranch house and the barn and the mountains beyond, and she did not smile. Just nodded once like she was confirming something to herself. Jack Denton was the first to see her. He walked over with 4 other ranch hands trailing behind, looked her up and down. Then he started laughing. "You are the new housekeeper?" "Yes." Nora's voice was steady, flat. "Boss said he wanted a housekeeper. Did not say he wanted." Jack stopped, looked at the other men. "Well, this is something." One of the other hands, a younger man named Pete, was grinning. "She is sure big enough to handle the work." "She is big enough to handle anything," Jack said, and the men laughed. "She's too big for this ranch. Hell, she's too big for 2 ranches. boss must be desperate if he hired her. Nora stood there and took it. Did not flinch, did not look away. Just stood with her bag in her hand and her trunk at her feet and let them laugh. Her face did not change. But Silas, walking out of the barn, saw the way her fingers tightened on the handle of the bag, saw the way her jaw set, saw the humiliation she was trying not to show. He walked across the yard. The men saw him coming, and the laughter died. Silas looked at Nora. Then he looked at Jack. "You are fired," Silas said. His voice was quiet, calm. "Pack your things. I want you off my property before supper." Jack's smile disappeared. "What?" "You heard me. I was joking. You were cruel. There is a difference." Silas did not raise his voice, did not need to. "I do not keep cruel men on my payroll. Pack your things." "She is just a housekeeper. She is a woman who came here to work. And you mocked her before she even got through the gate." "Datsai matamamis." Silas took a step closer. "I told you to hire a housekeeper. You hired her. She is my employee now, and I do not tolerate anyone disrespecting my employees, so pack your things." Jack's face went red, then white. He looked at the other men, but they were all staring at the ground. No one was going to back him up. "You are firing me over her?" "I am firing you because you showed me who you are, and I do not want that on my ranch." Jack spat in the dirt. "You will regret this." "No, I will not." Silas did not move. "You have until supper. After that, if you are still here, I will remove you myself." Jack stormed off toward the bunkhouse. The other men scattered, and Silas turned to Nora, who was still standing by the wagon with her face carefully blank. "I apologize for that," Silas said. "You should not have been treated that way." Nora looked at him, really looked at him. "You did not have to fire him." "Yes, I did. He was your foreman. He was a man who thought cruelty was funny. I do not need men like that." Silas picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing. "Let me show you to the house." Nora followed him across the yard. The house was worse than she expected. The kitchen was filthy. The floors were covered in mud and dust. There were dishes in the basin that looked like they had been there for weeks. The whole place smelled like neglect. "I know it is bad," Silas said, setting down her trunk in the small bedroom off the kitchen. "My wife died 6 years ago. I have not—" He stopped, started again. "I have not taken care of things the way I should have." "I can fix it," Nora said. "I know you can. That is why I hired you." He looked at her. "Jack will be gone by supper. The other men will not bother you. If they do, you tell me, immediately." "I can handle the men." "I am sure you can, but you should not have to." Silas walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "What he said, about you being too big. That was cruel and it was wrong, and I am sorry you had to hear it." Nora's throat was tight. "Men have said worse. That does not make it right." "No, but it makes it familiar." She set down her bag. "Thank you for firing him. Most men would not have." "Then most men are cowards." Silas put his hat back on. "I will leave you to settle in. Supper is at 6. Whatever you make will be better than what we have been eating." After he left, Nora stood in the kitchen and looked around at the work ahead of her. Then she rolled up her sleeves and started cleaning. By supper time, the kitchen was spotless, and there was stew simmering on the stove and fresh biscuits cooling on the table. The men came in quietly, awkwardly. They did not look at her directly, just mumbled their thanks and sat down. Jack was not there. His bunk was empty. His horse was gone from the barn. He had left before supper, just like Silas ordered. Silas came in last, sat at the head of the table, looked at the food, then looked at Nora. "This looks good." "It is just stew. It is more than we have had in months." The men ate like they had been starving, seconds and thirds. Nora stood by the stove and watched them demolish everything she made. When they were done, they thanked her and left, all except Silas. He stayed at the table nursing a cup of coffee. "You are a good cook." "My mother was a cook. I learned from her." "Where is she now?" "Dead 5 years ago." Nora started cleaning up. "It was just the two of us. After she died, I worked in boarding houses and hotels, moved around. This is the first time I have had a place of my own to run." "It is your place now," Silas said. "Run it however you want. I will not interfere." "Even if I change things? Especially if you change things." "This house needs changing." Nora looked at him across the kitchen. This big, quiet man who had fired his foreman without hesitation to defend her. "Why did you really fire him?" "I told you why. You fired him because he insulted me. But you did not even know me. For all you knew, I could have been terrible at my job." "But he did not know that either." Silas set down his coffee cup. "He mocked you because of how you look, not because of your work. That is the kind of man who will cut corners and cheat and blame others when things go wrong. I do not want that kind of man running my operation." So it was not about me. It was about you and about me, and about what kind of ranch I want to run. He stood up. "I want to run a place where people are judged by their work, not by their appearance, not by whether they are easy to look at, by whether they show up and do the job and treat others with respect. Jack failed that test in the first 5 minutes. So yes, I fired him because of you. And I would do it again." Nora did not know what to say to that. So she just nodded and went back to cleaning. And Silas left her to it. The days settled into a rhythm. Nora woke before dawn and had breakfast ready by 6. The men ate and thanked her and went to work. She spent her days cleaning and cooking and slowly bringing the house back to life. She scrubbed floors and washed windows and aired out rooms that had been closed for years. She mended curtains and organized the pantry and made the place look like somewhere people actually lived. And every evening, Silas sat at the table after the other men left and talked to her. Not about anything important, just small things. The weather, the cattle, a coyote he saw on the North Ridge. She talked back, told him about the towns she had lived in, the people she had worked for, the best meals she ever made, and the worst meals she ever tried to salvage. They became something like friends. But the other men were wary of her. They thanked her for meals and stayed out of her way. But they did not talk to her, did not joke with her the way they joked with each other. They treated her like she was fragile, like one wrong word would get them fired the way it got Jack fired. One afternoon in late June, Nora was in the barn looking for a basket she had left there earlier. She found it and turned to leave and nearly ran into Pete, the young ranch hand who had been with Jack that first day. "Sorry, ma'am," Pete said, backing up fast. "Did not mean to startle you." "You did not startle me." Nora held the basket against her hip. "Is there something you need?" "No, ma'am. Just—" He stopped, looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize for what I said that first day. About you being big enough to handle the work. It was rude." "It was honest," Nora said. "It was mean, and I am sorry." Nora studied him. He was maybe 20 years old, skinny and sunburned, and clearly terrified she was going to get him fired. Apology accepted. Pete's shoulders relaxed. Thank you, ma'am. And Pete? Nora waited until he looked at her. You do not have to walk on eggshells around me. I am not going to run to Silas every time someone says something I do not like. I am not fragile. You can talk to me like a normal person. Yes, ma'am. Pete almost smiled. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did the boss really fire Jack? I mean, I know what Jack said was wrong, but the boss has let Jack get away with worse before. Why was this different? Nora thought about it. I think maybe it was not different. I think maybe Silas had been looking for a reason to fire him, and Jack gave him one. So it was not about you? Oh, it was about me. But not just about me. Nora shifted the basket. Sometimes people reach a point where they realize they have been tolerating something they should not have been tolerating. And then one more thing happens, and they are done. I think that is what happened with Jack. He was the one more thing. Pete nodded slowly. That makes sense. And then after that, the men started talking to her. Not a lot, but more than before. They asked her opinion about things, made small jokes, treated her like a person instead of a liability. And Silas noticed. One evening in July, after the men had left, Silas said, "You have won them over." "Have I?" "They talk to you now, laugh with you. I heard Pete asking you about your biscuit recipe yesterday. He wants to make them for his sweetheart." Nora smiled a little. "I told him the secret is butter and not overworking the dough." "You are good for this place," Silas said quietly. "The men are happier. The house is livable again. Everything runs better with you here. That is my job." "It is more than your job." He looked at her across the table. "You have brought this place back to life, including me." Nora's heart was beating too fast. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I have been half dead for 6 years, going through the motions, working because I did not know what else to do. And then you came, and suddenly I had a reason to come inside at night. A reason to sit at this table instead of eating standing up in the barn. A reason to—" He stopped, swallowed. "A reason to want more than just survival." "Silas, I am not good at this," he said. "I have not said these things to anyone since my wife died. But I think you should know that you matter, not just as a housekeeper, as a person. You matter to me." Nora's eyes were burning. "You fired your foreman for me after knowing me for 5 minutes. I think I already knew I mattered to you." "I fired him because what he did was wrong. But I kept you because—" He stopped again, took a breath. "Because this house has not felt like a home since Catherine died. And now it does. Because of you. I am just a housekeeper. No, you are more than that. And I think you know it." Nora looked at him. At this big, quiet man who had defended her without hesitation and given her a place where she was valued. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I do not want you to leave. I am saying I want you to stay. Not just as my housekeeper, as—" He stopped, could not finish. "As what?" "As my wife, if you will have me." The words hung in the air between them. Nora stared at him. "You want to marry me?" "Yes." "We have known each other for 2 months." "I know. People will talk. Let them talk. They will say you married me because you were desperate, because no one else would have you. I do not care what they say." Silas stood up, came around the table, stood in front of her. I am asking you because I want you. Because you have made this place into a home again. Because I wake up every morning and I am glad you are here. Because the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I am losing something I cannot afford to lose. Nora's throat was so tight she could barely speak. I am not pretty. I am not delicate. I am not what men want. You are exactly what I want. His voice was firm, certain. I do not want pretty and delicate. I want strong and real. I want someone who can handle this life, who can handle me, who can turn a house into a home and make men remember their manners and stand in a yard being mocked without breaking. That is what I want. That is you. I come with nothing. You come with everything I need. Nora looked up at him, at his serious face and his steady eyes and the certainty in his expression. Yes. Yes. Yes, I will marry you. Silas pulled her into his arms and held her. Just held her. And Nora wrapped her arms around him and held him back and thought about the foreman who laughed and the man who fired him, and how sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. They were married in August in the small church in Copper Ridge. The whole ranch came. All the hands who had learned to respect her, including Pete, who was grinning like he had won something. Half the town came too, not to judge, but to witness, because word had spread about what Silas Grant had done, how he had fired his foreman for insulting the new housekeeper, how he had defended a woman he barely knew, how he had chosen decency over convenience. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, no one said a word. When the ceremony was over, Silas kissed his wife in front of everyone. And Pete started clapping, and the other hands joined in, and soon the whole church was applauding. At the reception, someone asked Nora if she was surprised that Silas had proposed. Yes and no, Nora said. I was surprised by how fast it happened. But I was not surprised that he asked, because I knew from the first day that he was the kind of man who meant what he said. When he fired Jack for insulting me, I knew he was someone who valued people over pride. That is the kind of man you build a life with. They lived on that ranch for the next 40 years. Nora ran the house and the men and eventually the books when Silas's eyesight started failing. They had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, and all of them grew up knowing that their father had fired his foreman before supper the day their mother arrived. It became family lore, the story they told to explain who Silas Grant was and what he valued. People in Copper Ridge talked about Silas and Nora Grant for 50 years. They talked about how he fired Jack Denton before supper for mocking her size. They talked about how he married her 2 months later. They talked about how some men think defending someone makes you soft, when really it proves you are strong enough to choose what is right over what is easy. And they talked about what Silas said when someone asked him years later if he regretted firing his foreman over a woman he barely knew. I did not fire him over a woman I barely knew. I fired him because I knew myself. And I knew that if I let that cruelty stand, I would have to look at myself in the mirror every morning and know I was the kind of man who tolerated cruelty. I would rather lose the best foreman in Wyoming than become that man. As it turns out, Jack was not the best foreman in Wyoming anyway, and Nora was the best thing that ever happened to me. So no, I do not regret it for one single second. Nora Grant died in 1924 at the age of 72. Silas died 3 months later. They were buried on the hill overlooking the ranch they built together. On Nora's headstone, Silas had carved the words he told her that first night when he asked her to stay. You are exactly what I want. Strong and real. You turned a house into a home and made men remember their manners. That is everything.